Hey everybody, we're going to get started in just a minute. We're going to let some people filter in and then we'll get started. Okay, hello everybody. Welcome. Um, this is our second webinar from the Ford Foundation that we're happy to bring to you. Um, Today is the Changing the Landscape of Independent Living, Building a Place for Everyone. So thank you for joining us. I'm Sierra Royster. I'm the Director of Innovation with April. And again, this is something that we've been working on with the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee within April's board. And so we're very excited to bring you this presentation today. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First, when you scroll over the screen, a menu bar should pop up. Depending on what device you are on, you can find that menu bar at the top or at the bottom of the screen. And that's where you can find the closed captioning for today's session. You can view the captioning by selecting the CC tab on the menu bar, and you have the choice of subtitle, or maybe it's the full transcript that you prefer. That will be there as well. We do have sign language interpreting for today's session. You can find the interpreter right on the screen. There will be slides that are shown. So during that time, there will be a line that's in between the slides and the presenters and the interpreter, and you can make that interpreter smaller or larger depending on your preference. And so if you have any technical issues, please use the chat feature for that. I will drop my email in there as well so that you can contact me. That is sroyster, ROYSTER, at April, APRIL rural, RURAL.org. And I'll drop that in the chat too. But if you could use that to kind of connect both of me if you need anything, any question answers that you need for today, that can be found in the Q&A box. So please feel free to drop in your questions. We are going to move through the presentation and we'll save time at the end to go over our questions. Today's session is being recorded and will be posted on our website afterwards, so you can go back and review it as well. We hope that we'll get to all of those today. And so I just again want to welcome everybody to this presentation. This is something that the DEI committee, our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, has been working on for a couple of years now. We conducted a survey a while back and understood that diversity, we just had numbers to put to what we kind of already imagined was the case within independent living, that our centers are not as diverse as we would like them to be, especially as the April makeup, since that's who we surveyed. So this is one of many opportunities that will be coming soon, of kind of understanding different communities and different cultures and how that plays a role within our centers. Today, we have some great presenters that are going to kind of guide us through what we could learn, what we can know, and then we have a Center for Independent Living here who will be kind of guiding us a little bit more on what they've learned and kind of that peer support that we can all learn from at the same time. We do have several speakers for today, so I hope that you'll hang out the whole time because there's much to learn from everybody. We have Ken Mitchell. He is from Disability Link in Atlanta, Georgia. And he has been a part of many of our presentations in the past, but has also been in this work for quite a long time. We have Ansuya Niken, who is been involved with centers in Indiana, but also has a vast history with working with different communities and talking about culture and racial diversity and understanding how to bring that within your workplace. So we're excited to have you as well. And then we also have Maria oh, I messed it up, Maria. I tried.
Palacios.
Palacios. See, I knew. I even spelled it phonetically for me and it still didn't work. But no matter what, we definitely welcome you. Sorry, I messed up the name. I practiced it too. But Maria has been in this work for decades. And so we're so excited for her to come and share her experience and her involvement in the disability rights and justice work that she has done, and sharing more about the communities that she has worked with and is part of. And then we also have Brenda Steinbuck and Lakeisha Whitman from the SPA Independent Living Center in Arkansas. So we welcome them because we understand that Centers for Independent Living, oftentimes it's helpful to see how these practices and how these things work within a center. And so with that, we're very excited to have them come share some of the things they've learned along the way and how they've worked hard to diversify their staff and make that a place where it represents the community they live within. So with all of that, I thank you all for joining us. I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Ken, who's going to get us started with sharing a little bit about the Black and African American community and culture. And Ken, do you want me to start with the video clip right first?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay, perfect. Let me get it pulled up here. All right, and Ken's going to be sharing a video from One Night in Miami, which is a movie. I think it's on Amazon Prime right now, but there's clips of it on YouTube as well. So that's what we'll be sharing with you right now. But in this clip, there is a young Black man, Jim Brown, who is an NFL football player, who is coming to the door in this very country setting. And he's coming to the screen door to knock on it. He's going to sit on the front porch with the man that owns the house, who is a white man, and his granddaughter, I believe, is the one that will also be there. And they're going to be having a conversation right here on the front porch. So this will be what we're going to start. Oh, hold on. Where are you at? Stop sharing. It doesn't want to share what I want it to share. There we go. Now, okay. All right, Ken, I'm going to go ahead and start it.
All righty.
Yes, may I help you?
Yes, ma'am. I'm here to see Mr. Carlton. Would you tell him that Jim Brown is...
Jim Brown? Oh, God, from the NFL. Grandpa, Jim Brown from the NFL is here and he wants to see you. Well, never. Never.
Would you look at who's on my porch? James Nathaniel Brown.
Hello there, Mr. Carlton.
Don't you hello me. Put her there, son. Come now, have a seat with me. Can I get you something to drink? Lemonade, maybe?
Oh, that's all right. Thank you, though.
Well, suit yourself. I'm certainly having me some. Fetch us a couple of glasses of that lemonade, would you, sweetie? Just in case you change your mind. How long you been back on the island?
Oh, I just got in last night.
And you came by to say hello. How thoughtful of you, Jimmy.
Well, my aunt said you were anxious to see me. I'm an early riser, so I thought I'd come right on over.
The early bird does catch the worm. But you already know that. You caught a hell of a lot of worms this year.
I guess you can say that.
No man who's run 1,860 yards in a season needs to be so humble.
Well, actually, it was 1,863.
No, that's more like it. That record is going to stand the test of time.
You know, I'd happily give that record back for a win over the Packers in that last game.
That Packers win is going to be forgotten by anyone who doesn't live in Goose Bay by tomorrow. Your record is going to be remembered forever.
Well, I don't see why I can't have the record and the win next time.
Right you are, son. Right you are. Jimmy, I just wanted to let you know that if there's ever anything I can do for you, you should never hesitate to reach out.
That's mighty kind of you, sir.
Our families go way back. Been looking after one another since the first folks settled on this island. Now, I wanted to make sure that I told you face to face, as long as I'm still here, that ain't ever gonna change.
Well, my aunt would be very happy to hear such a kind sentiment from you, Mr. Carlton. Not everyone else on the island has been so supportive.
Ah, crabs in a barrel, I say. To hell with them all. I, for one, think that you are a credit not only to this community, but to the entire state of Georgia. I've never been prouder to say that I live on St. Simon's Island than I am now. And I would make a point of adding a place where the great Jim Brown is from.
Here you boys go. 2 lemonades.
Thank you, darling.
Well, thank you.
Sorry to bother you while you're entertaining Grandpa, but if you could come move that bureau when you have a moment.
Oh, sorry. I almost forgot.
You, moving some furniture?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you should let me help you with that.
So considerate of you, Jimmy, but you know we don't allow in the house, so it's quite all right. It really is wonderful to see you, son. You keep up the good work. You do us all proud.
Hi, again, this is Ken Mitchell.
Go ahead, Ken, you're good.
Okay, I couldn't, my thing is still talking. So yeah, this is Ken. And so for some of you guys who may not have read the bio, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I grew up in Atlanta as a youngster. I went to elementary school in the central part of Georgia, one of the poorest counties in Georgia, Hancock County. And from there, I moved to Connecticut, one of the richest counties, not only in Connecticut, but in the nation, Fairfield County. So one of the things that I remember that was kind of the same in both is that growing up, I went to segregated schools. I went to segregated schools in the South and segregated schools in the North. And even though the South is kind of like the easy to pick on because of the atmosphere there, it's also related, the same thing in the North, or maybe a little differently related, but the same factors. And that might be happening throughout the United States. I haven't lived in every place in the United States, mostly on the East Coast, but for where you guys are, it may be the same, and you may know that better than I. One of the things I want to tell you is that whenever I say something like you should do this or you shouldn't do that, it scares me because I don't know if you should or shouldn't do anything. I'm not here to tell you what to do or what not to do. Perhaps I'll give you a couple of things you may want to consider, going back to the video, which we'll talk about a little bit in a minute. So some of the things you might want to consider, especially in the efforts of sills and silks. Now, one of the things I would like you to consider is that at your sill or silk, if your population of the people that you serve is one thing and your sill or silk population is something else, that may be something to consider. How is that happening? How can you affect that change? Because I know that we want to have our centers and silks represent the population that we serve. If you have a small sill or silk where there's only 2 or 3 people, that may be a little more difficult, but over the number of years, there should be some kind of correlation between your employees and your population. Again, I said should. And remember, anytime I say should, I'm messing up because I don't know that as a fact, but that's something you might want to consider. So I went back and was talking about why I believe that some of the things are happening in our employment areas. For instance, why the ratios may be different. And when we were talking, we talked about welcoming, which means is it welcoming when we see our particular centers? And for me, it's like I didn't even give you my stuff about me. I should have said something earlier, but I happen to be Black. I'm also blind. I'm also a veteran, and I'm also 6'3". Those are just some of the characteristics that I have. Things that might be interesting to you is that I happen to have no light perception, what basically means I can't see any light at all. And so some of those things, when I go into a particular place, it's important to me to hopefully be welcoming. For instance, how the audio sounds are, or if there is this description of the place, if they happen to have that, it makes it more welcoming for me. I remember for a while I lived in Milford, New Hampshire. And in Milford, New Hampshire, I lived there for a year. And I remember not seeing too many people like myself. The population of Milford, New Hampshire was about 16,000. There was 6 people of color in the town, me being one of them, and my mailman, his wife, and 3 kids were the other. And so there was not quite the welcoming or the camaraderie that I was hoping for when I went there, which brings me back to the video that you guys were seeing and why I brought it up. So one of the things about the video that I noticed, and you probably noticed other stuff, was that the older gentleman was, kind of welcoming. St. Simon's Islands is just off the coast of Georgia, or the main part of Georgia. And that's where Jim Brown grew up. Jim Brown, as you heard, was a professional football player. He was quite well known, still is. He did a lot of civil rights actions. He also was in a number of movies. He gave up football at the height of his career to, I guess, go into acting. But he still was quite the civil rights leader to this day. So when the video showed that even over the facade of the welcomeness, the admiration, the attitude, there still was an underlying bigotry that was there. And I might consider with our Sills and Silks, perhaps unknowingly or knowingly, there may be an underlying bigotry that we may be perceived, even if it's not there. Let's put it that way. And so when we look at our centers and look at your centers, I would like you to consider the fact that if you have a population of 40% of one religion or ethnicity or whatever it is, and your CIL only has, only has had maybe a population of 2 or 3%, you might want to consider why that's happening, or the law of averages says that it should be greater. There I go again, should. You guys got to catch me on that, but you can't talk, so I guess you can't say anything just yet. Anyway, so something that you might want to consider about why that is so. And one of my things is actually the beginning of the welcoming, and the old saying about, you only get one chance to make a first impression, and that's often recognized as well. So a couple things to consider, and hopefully in the question part that you might want to do is the intro. What happens when a person first finds out about your CIL center? How is it perceived? How is it perceived in the neighborhood? How are you projecting that to your community rather? Are you projecting it as such and such? The people who go out and advertise for your center, how is that being done? And then also look at the members of your center. If the members of your center are all of one ethnicity or race or religion or even disability, how is that being perceived? How are you portraying that? There's Some people have accused CILS, or Centers for Independent Living, as having an hierarchy of disabilities, and that's not something that we want to be perceived. And how do we address that? So those are some of the things. One, the introduction. Two, is that after the introduction, what do we do? How do we actually perceive ourselves? In the video, the beginning was good. There was some underlying stuff that, if you noticed, Jim Brown had said, and then of course the actual attitude when he had let his guard down a little bit and say, "Hey, look, Al, can I help you?" And then the answer, "But we don't let people in the house," brought him back to reality, and the video ended there. And then again, so for our CILS and SILKs, are we doing something of the same? We're willing to let people talk about becoming employees or becoming members, but are we really letting them in? And two, and even if we're willing to do that, how is it being perceived? How is it being recognized by the community? And if we don't know that, maybe we should consider reaching out to the community a little bit more, how we are doing that, how we are perceived when we do that. So those are some of the things that hopefully that we can talk about today in our meeting to discuss. And with all that in mind, I'm going to switch it over to my newly good friend, Maria, and she'll have a couple of things to say.
Thank you so much. And good afternoon again. It is such a pleasure and a special honor to be sharing space with you all today. A quick description of myself. I am a Latina, indigenous woman of brown light skin, and I have brown eyes and brown hair. Again, my name is Maria Palacios, and I feel like a really special connection with you all here today, because I feel like I am a child of the movement. I have been an activist and an advocate in my own community here in Houston for the last 40 years. And I'm also an artist and an author who has been using my own personal experience of who I am as a Latina and translating it into forms of art that communicate those experiences to other disabled people and to people who want to know the intersections of disability and the things that we experience as Latinos. I was born in Latin America and had polio as an infant. And I came to the United States when I was 15 years old. I actually grew up being shuffled from place to place in search of a cure until my mom and I landed here in the United States, and my personal journey of positive disability identity began. I love the way that sounds, positive disability identity, because not everybody has it. And just because you're disabled, it doesn't mean that you connect. And such is the case, especially for certain groups of extra marginalized people. So my positive disability identity, or CRIP identity, is something that evolved through my involvement with advocacy and exposure to disabled people who were making waves and demanding equality. That was such an odd concept to me at the time, having come from a place where the word disability would never be associated with pride or independence. I was lucky to have gotten involved with some of the revolutionary CRIPs of the day. I was part of ADAPT and part of the movement that actually passed the ADA. I'm very proud of my early involvement with advocacy, because that put me in the front lines of what we know as such an important part of our history. I was very much in the very center of a movement that pretty much left people like myself out. I guess I had my own CRIP camp experience, because I do believe that there is nothing more powerful or more important to disabled people than having access to the survival and advocacy of other disabled people as part of our own journey of empowerment and independence. However, I want you to know that the word independence doesn't necessarily come natural to my culture. Independence is often seen as a cultural threat, and especially so in the case of those who grew up disabled like myself. In a culture where adult kids are not expected to leave the nest at 18, or in a culture where daughters stay home until they marry, or in a culture that believes disabled people are a cross to bear and accepted as such, the word independence often translates as a threat. I'll never forget the first time that I landed at my local CIL. And I was just a kid, like maybe 18. And I don't even remember how I ended up there, but I know that I found myself, and for the first time ever, I was able to see other disabled people in positions of power. I had no idea that the word independence was something that could apply to me. I encourage you that in your center's efforts to serve Latino communities, you first recognize that oppression still exists, and it's very real. Oppression still exists. There are communities within the Latino community who often live in fear of deportation, fear of being seen as an outsider, fear of not being able to communicate, fear of not fitting in, fear of not deserving to be there. And I know, and we know that ableism does that to all disabled people. But when rejection and invisibility are also connected to the color of your skin, or the language that you speak, or the place where you were born, it is just so much harder to overcome obstacles, harder to advocate for your rights and for the rights of others like yourself. I encourage you all to learn the geography of our diversity. And I say it like that, purposely using the word geography of our diversity, because one of the things that I encountered in my own quest, in my own journey as a Latina, as a disabled Latina, was that I often got placed in a little category of, oh, she's Mexican. So I encourage you to learn the beauty and the geography of our diversity, that not all Spanish-speaking people are only from one region of the world, that not all disabled people, even though we speak, not all Latino disabled peoples, even though we speak the same language, our experience is almost as diverse as you can really imagine it. It really is. We encourage you to stop putting us in boxes of cultural expectations by believing we should Americanize ourselves by learning English or not sharing certain aspects of our culture or language traditions. No, we bring color, we bring sound, we bring spice, we bring art, but we also bring the trauma of language oppression. I have been in places of employment and places in society that have denied me access to my language, that have denied me the opportunity and the right to be who I really am. So please do recognize that we bring the trauma of language oppression, and that it still hurts, and it's still something that shapes our persona and our ability to communicate in the way that we communicate. We are also superstitious and come from a culture rooted in ableist superstition that believes disabled people are some form of punishment. We are still oppressed and still connected to our roots and to the love for things that sometimes only exist in the heartbeat of our memories. Many of us had to leave behind our birth nations, our families, our language, and reinvent ourselves in order to survive. We have the right to still love our language, culture, and traditions while loving this country at the same time. Also know that what we consider family could be very different and not align with what the dominant culture considers to be family. In our culture, we have so many relatives that actually are part of our immediate family that we consider family. In our culture, we usually do not put disabled people and elderly people in institutions. So that's one thing for you to consider and think about when you are, as a center, transitioning people out of nursing homes, and you wonder why you don't see people like us, why you don't see more Latinos transitioning out. One of the things is that we are often kept at home, and for better or for worse, or, however, whichever way it may go, it's part of the cultural oppression and the cultural protectiveness that we endure and we live with. So when you look for us, when you look for Latinos, when you look for people like myself, I encourage you to try to find us in places that speak Spanish. You know, look where the language is, look where the roots exist. Look for us in religious institutions and on the margins of such religious institutions, because some parts of our community are so marginalized that everyone shuts the door on our faces and denies us services, denies us community, denies us access to survival. And religious institutions, along with religious ableism, tend to be the only spaces that open the doors to many Latinos with disabilities. Look for us in hospitals and charity centers. Look for us in spaces where everybody else has been helped but us. Look for us in food banks. You will find us also in the schools where our kids go to school. You can find us on the margins of all the intersections where you forgot to look. We exist. We exist, and we have so much to give. Please offer us a space where we can contribute the language, the beauty, the color of our culture. And you know, when I speak of this, I know that there's a sensitive cultural line. I heard somebody mention recently that at their center, there was a staff member who was Latina, and this person wanted to celebrate some kind of Latino celebration, whether it was Fiestas Patrias or Cinco de Mayo or something. And this person was not understood on why that was important to her. And the truth is, you know, okay, so yes, it has to be related to disability, but we have to think in terms of intersections. We're not just disabled people. When I'm Maria Palacios, disabled, Latina, queer, mother, immigrant, I'm part of so many intersections. And you know, one way of looking at those celebrations, for example, is not in thinking in terms of like, well, what does that have to do with disability, but more in terms of how truly inaccessible those general non-disabled cultural festivities are for disabled people. Many times disabled people are not able to participate in those cultural events because they're so framed in the context of non-disabledness that unless you're able to either pass or just watch from the sidelines, you're not really participating in those celebrations. So when we say, please, let's have a Cinco de Mayo celebration, let's have Fiestas Patrias, let's remember that representation really matters. And then when you have someone in mariachi costume and in a wheelchair, or somebody singing rancheras for Fiestas Patrias and they're blind, or we're bringing aspects of our intersections to you. And you have to be able to see that as part of who we are, without saying, well, what does it have to do with disability? Let me tell you, it has everything to do with disability. I'm sorry. Yeah. Another thing that I wanted to share is encourage you to plan ahead. You know, one of my favorite stories to tell about the planning ahead part is a story of this town that had been waiting for rain since forever after a terrible drought. And the town decided to have like a gathering to pray for rain. And they decided that after praying so hard, they're gonna come back the next day for the second day of praying for rain, and rain is gonna happen. So we have this huge crowd the following day. You know, we gather to pray for rain, and there's only one person sitting there with an umbrella. And people looked at this person like, wow, what's so weird? We haven't gotten rain in years, and this person sitting here with an umbrella. Well, the lesson here is that if we're gonna plan for something, let's really be prepared. Let's believe we're gonna have rain. Let's believe we're gonna be reaching out to Latinos and offering services that will make us more diverse, that would allow communities to really participate. So plan ahead. As an example, have a budget that is inclusive of our language needs. Very, very few spaces until recently have really made an effort to help us participate. Help us celebrate our heritage by allowing us to bring parts of our cultural wealth into your experience. And what better way of doing it than allowing us to speak our language, especially if we don't speak English. So we ask ourselves, why are disabled Latinos not part of the movement? We often are in the background of things. We're often not seen or seen through the lens of cultural expectations that do not fit our realities all the time. We sometimes might think that you don't care. There's a lack of materials in Spanish. There's a lack of information in Spanish. Many Latinos fall through the cracks of the movement because there's little there to support our presence and participation. Just saying that you want us is not enough. So how do we prepare to reach out to these marginalized communities? I know everybody says hire more disabled Latinos, have more diversity, but we must recognize that unless we plan, unless we make space and create opportunities for these communities to participate, things will not change. We must grow the number of consumers from Latino communities by investing in our cultural wealth and offering language justice-based services. Must recognize the various intersections where disability exists. Would you say no to providing interpreters to deaf consumers? Then why deny Spanish language interpreters to disabled consumers who need it? Are your intake forms and brochures bilingual? And stop saying you can find us when we constitute 20% of the US population. There are so many things to think about, so many things to consider, so many things to embrace. For me, the one most important thing is language justice. And I want to close my section by reading the statement that has to do with language justice. Language justice means that everyone is listened to and understood without hierarchy, stigma, or shame. It honors our right to communicate our feelings and ideas and demands we move in mutual respect for all people, regardless of whether or how they sign, speak, or otherwise convey what's on their mind or in their heart. People communicate in a multitude of ways, through spoken language, through movement, through signs, through breathing, through electronics, through giving touch, through writing, through silence, through reading, through our eyes. There are as many ways to communicate as there are people. All types of communication are valid and important. What we choose to express is unique to us as individuals. Our communications, our expressions are valuable. Language is vast and abundant. Some spoken languages include whistles and clicks. Some movement languages include sounds. Some languages are written while others are not. Some languages are used by just 2 people, some by 300, some by millions of people. There are no right or wrong languages. They are all precious means of expression. Our languages carry our cultures. They tie us to each other, to our ancestors, and to the way we understand life through the practice of naming. There are languages created and used specifically by disabled and deaf people. And as our body minds inform our means of expression, we use augmentative and alternative communication, American Sign Language, Lengua de Señas Mexicana or LSM, Black American Sign Language, proctile communication with and through our tracks and our staccato breathing, through our brain fog and aphasia, through pain and pain meds, through masks and voice amplifiers, through text and videos, through our grunts and moans and sounding our worlds, through blinks and blowing through straws and more ways than we can outline. Language can give power. Language can take power away. Language can be used to normalize oppression. Language can also be used to disrupt, dismantle, and transform oppression. Language justice is about access to communication, to relationship building, and to our communities. Language justice isn't just about access. We strive to flatten hierarchies by creating spaces where each person is respected and where power is shared among speakers of all languages. Language justice centers multilingual access and decenters the supremacy of spoken English. And with our other political commitments, we should enter into language justice practice humbly, knowing that others have paved the way and that we are in a place of learning. We want to believe in the power and brilliance of immigrant communities and deaf communities and know that our inclusion is key to achieving justice for all oppressed peoples. That beautiful piece comes from Sins Invalid, which is the organization that I work for, and it is a disability justice and movement building organization. And Sins Invalid happens to be amongst the creators of what is now known as disability justice. So I hope that this few minutes of what I brought to you gives you an insight into the world of Latinos with disabilities and give you a little bit more perspective into how important language is to us, to all of us, including those who don't speak Spanish. Language in general, that we should believe in a world that allows all disabled people to communicate. I encourage you to invest in Latino communities, to recognize that by you doing so, you're growing, you're helping your center grow, and you're offering a space of honesty and diversity where Latinos can come in and really begin to acclimate ourselves to what independent living really, really means. Because as we know, independence means different things to each of us. And we have to continue moving forward without leaving people behind anymore. It hurts me to say that I was part of the movement, a movement that left people like me out. So thank you so much for this space and this opportunity. And it's my pleasure and my honor to now pass the mic and the stage to Ansaya.
Thank you, Maria. I want to say thank you to April for inviting me to be part of this very esteemed panel, and just absolutely powerful messages from both our panelists that have spoken already. So I am a woman of Asian descent, South Asian descent. My ancestors are from India, so you could probably pick up a little bit of my accent as I speak. And so what I'm going to talk about for the next few minutes is talk about Asian cultures and how might disabilities be perceived within Asian cultures. So we could move to the next slide, please. The reason why I put this map in here, when we talk about Asia, as you can notice from the map, it's huge. And Asia, I think oftentimes when we think about Asia, we don't even think about Russia, because Russia is really closely aligned with Europe. Then we have the countries of the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and so on. And oftentimes when we think Asian, our mind goes more to what is on the right-hand side of your map. But if you look at that, that within itself includes multiple countries. So when I reference Asian cultures, I might be talking about some of the norms that permeate through all those countries, but what I want you to keep in mind is that each of those countries, each of those cultures are so unique in themselves. So when you think about your independent living centers and you thinking about who's coming through your doors, whether they are the people that you serve, whether they are your employees, it's really important that while we think about them as Asians, but we also think about them specific to the country that they come from, specific to the culture and the cultural norms that they might bring into your workplace, because that certainly differs from one Asian culture to another. So while I'm going to talk about Asian, I'm going to talk about the commonalities that run through Asian cultures. Really, really important to keep in mind that there is diversity within the Asian cultures. As Maria mentioned earlier on, when you think about Hispanic cultures, when you think about Central South American cultures, it's not just Mexico, it's multiple countries, each with their own diversity. So, so just something to keep in mind as you think about people that you work with that would be of Asian descent. Okay, can we move to the next slide, please? All right, so this is kind of an infographic that was put together by the CDC, and I believe it was put together in 2020, and it kind of gives us kind of a breakdown of people with disabilities, and the focus here is on adults, across the different racial groups that we as a country capture. And you would notice that when you look at the Asian population, it's the smallest number. 1 in 10 Asians have actually been identified with having a disability. Now, a lot of folks in the Asian community, or a lot of people that do research in this space, have said that they don't quite agree with that number. They don't think it's a real reflection of the number of Asians with disabilities in the US. And the reason why they feel that this number is not a true reflection is that, and they've provided a number of reasons, but just a couple of them is that sometimes when these surveys are conducted or this research is done, they might not reach out to Asian communities on a broad scale. So they survey maybe a smaller number than they would survey with other groups. The other reason that has been provided is that when these surveys are done, oftentimes Asian Americans are grouped as a single group, and that could skew the results. They've also mentioned that cultural stigmas that are associated with disabilities amongst the Asian community could prevent people from participating in these surveys. So while we say that 1 in 10 Asians have a disability, a lot of researchers believe that that number is probably higher than that. So what I'm going to do for the next few minutes that I have is to actually just focus on some of those cultural stigmas that the Asian communities might carry, might have when it comes to disabilities. Next slide, please. You can go ahead and put them all up. Thank you. All right, so the first thing is that amongst the Asian community, just the conversation or the topic of disability is often treated as a taboo subject. It's often treated as something that, look, we don't want to talk about it. Or if we do talk about it, it's something that we're going to just talk about it amongst our family, within our home, behind our closed doors. In some cases, it may even be seen as, this is just not a real thing. So I'm not going to talk about it. So it's something that generally amongst Asian cultures, there isn't a level of comfort having conversations around disabilities, people with disabilities. It's something that as a culture, as a community, we tend to hide because we tend to be ashamed of it, or we think that, you know what, if I treat it, it can go away. There could be a medical treatment and it could just go away. So oftentimes it's very closeted. It's, as I said, it's kept within families, it's kept within homes, it's discussions that are held within these very, very confined spaces. It's not really spoken about in terms of sharing it with communities, but sharing it with folks from the outside. So we don't go out into the public, we don't share stories about family members that might have disabilities, challenges that we might be facing. We don't go out and seek help for it. It's pretty much kept within the family, kept within the community. And oftentimes when a child is born with a disability, there's the perception that we believe that this child will not be able to lead a full life, that this child will always be dependent on others and will not be able to have that independent living. So in terms of wanting to reach out to independent living centers for support, for help, whatever that might look like for the family, that's not going to happen organically. It's not going to be something that just happens very, very easily because of that sense of wanting to keep it within the family, a sense of shame that could be associated with it. So you'd find that the child that is born with a disability may not get a full education. The child would be kept at home and probably provided with some kind of basic education by family members. As a spin-off of that, the chances of that individual then being able to go out and find a job is going to be less likely. And follow-up to that is that chances of any form of independent living is going to be minimized to a large extent. So you find there's a ripple effect that begins to happen. Oftentimes, people with disabilities, or the child that's born with disabilities, even seeing them as getting married, having children, that's oftentimes seen as an impossible thing to happen. So that's kind of how that is viewed. And so some of the traditional views that come with the conversations around disabilities, and I'm going to talk about one of them, which is the concept of karma. And in a lot of Asian cultures, and specifically in the East Asian culture, which I'm a member of, we believe in the process of rebirth. So we go through our life, and if we have sinned in some way, if we have treated people badly, we just haven't been kind to folks and things like that, and we've led a life that was not a good life, then we believe that we will come back in another life to make up for what we've done wrong in the previous life. And sometimes there's the belief that when you come back in your new life, you could come back as a person with disabilities so that you can pay for the sins of your previous life. And so as a result, families associate the disability with that shame and that blame for what their family member could have done in the previous life, that is causing them to come back with disabilities in this current life. So these are some of the cultural stigmas that Asian cultures have associated with disabilities, and that could therefore, results in that level of discomfort, having conversations around it, revealing that I have a member in my family that has a disability, going out to seek any kind of support and help that individual would need. These are the things that would actually hold individuals back. Okay, and the other thing about with the cultural stigma is that families or communities feel like there's this concept of saving face. Saving face meaning that, I'm in whatever I do, I will put my best foot forward. Now, if I do have a member in my family, be it my child or anyone else, that has a disability, that actually prevents me as a family from putting my best foot forward. So in the community, I end up losing face with my community because I have a child with disability. So a lot of Asian cultures, the concept of saving face is really important, and having a member in my family with a disability actually causes me to lose face, and therefore I kind of lose that social capital that I may earn in the community. Next slide, please. So what this slide shows is that this is based on some kind of research, and I have the name of the book at the bottom of the slide. It's Erin Meyer, and the name of her book is The Culture Map. She talks a lot about different cultures around the world and how, or nationalities around the world, and how we as a culture respond to different things. And in this particular slide, on the left-hand side of the slide are individualistic cultures. On the right-hand side are the collectivist cultures. And so what this means is, if you look at the countries that are on the left-hand side of your slide, the individualistic cultures, these are cultures that put a lot of focus on the individual. So individuals are encouraged to be independent. If you think about, like here in the US is actually one of the most individualistic culture. And so we encourage our children to go out and be who they want to be. We encourage them to recognize what are their strengths very, very early in life, and work on developing those strengths. We talk about their weaknesses, and we say, look, don't see this as a weakness, but see this as an opportunity or an area for growth. These are the things that we foster in our children. These are what individualistic cultures do. Collectivist cultures, on the other hand, it's more about a group dynamic. It's more about what do we do as a family? What do we do as a group? And so therefore, when it comes to an individual with a disability in these cultures that are on the right-hand side, and you can see a lot of the Asian cultures are there. We've got China, we've got Thailand, we've got India. A lot of these, we've got Japan, a lot of these collectivist cultures on the right-hand side, it's about a group focus. It's about a focus on family, focus on community. So if we have an individual in our community, in our family, we as a community, we as a family will take care of them. We will protect them. We will provide for whatever that individual needs. And so we may not go out and seek the support of independent living centers, of outside resources, because that is what the characteristic of collectivist cultures are. So just having this kind of awareness of how Asian cultures might perceive disabilities, might perceive, or not might perceive, but how they actually handle it is really helpful when you're working in the centers and when you're trying to reach out to folks in your community from the Asian community that do have disabilities, that do have family members with disabilities. Think about these are some of the cultural nuances that will play in when you approach them, when you reach out to them. The good part is that what recent research is showing is that there's a kind of shift in the Asian community to start becoming or to start engaging in conversation around disabilities, not seeing it as something to be embarrassed about, to feel shame and blame around, but rather that this is something that we can help members in our community. The more we engage in conversations, the more we recognize that this is part of the community and that we can offer support that could come from sources outside. So that's the good part of it, is that the community is slowly starting to open up, slowly starting to engage with members outside their community to engage in these conversations around disability. So a couple of things, and the next slide will show just a couple of things that you can think about in terms of what can be done when you're reaching out to the Asian American community. So provide resources on how to have conversations about disabilities with their families. So as I said, there is that level of discomfort, and a lot of it is, is probably around maybe I just don't have the language to use in terms of how do I communicate what's going on with my child, what's going on with my family member. I don't have the skills, I don't have the tools on how to do this. And that keeps me from engaging with people outside my community. So as an independent living center, if part of the literature, part of the resources that you can put out there to help Asian families engage in these kind of conversations, that would be helpful. Train staff to be culturally sensitive. As I mentioned, Asian culture is very nuanced. There's a lot of diversity within Asian culture. It can differ to a large extent from your norms for American culture. A lot of Asian families are coming over as immigrants, and so they're bringing in a lot of the cultural norms, the cultural behaviors, and so on from the communities that they come from. So in terms of training staff, helping staff, setting staff up for success so that they can engage with the Asian community would be really, really helpful. A language. A lot of the immigrant families that come in are non-native English speakers. Maria spoke a whole lot about language. If you can put your literature out there, your websites, have interpreters, all of that would be really, really helpful in terms of reaching out to the community. And then conduct more research on the unique struggles of disabled Asian Americans as a product of both disability and Asian American identity. So that's where that sense of intersectionality comes in. So you are working with someone who has a disability, but then there's other components to it. You've got them coming from India, China, Japan, wherever that might be. And then you've got them coming in as an immigrant. So you've got all these layers of intersectionality, and really important to see the individual holistically and not just as an individual with a disability. And then finally, a couple of resources. I think if you click one more time, well, thank you, Sierra. So there's a couple of resources out here that might be helpful in terms of just kind of, just increasing knowledge around, awareness around Asians with disabilities. And the three of them are there on this slide for you. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you for that. We're gonna do now is turn it over to Brenda and Lakeisha. So I'll go ahead and share your slides as well.
Hello, everybody. I'm Brenda Steinbuck, and I am the director of Spa Area Independent Living Services in Hot Springs, Arkansas. I am a white woman with white hair, and so I will be, and I wear glasses, and I didn't see Lakeisha on. Maybe her.
I'm here.
You're here? Okay, there you go. Lakeisha, you want to do your description?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Lakeisha Whitman, and I'm located in Whitehall, Arkansas at the Southeast Arkansas Independent Living Center. I am a Black female with curly locks, and I wear glasses.
So before we get started today, I just wanted to give everybody a snapshot of our two centers. Between the two centers, we have 15 staff members, and we have 10 women, 5 men. We have 3 team members who are white or Caucasian. We have 8 team members who are Black or African American. We have 2 brown members who are Hispanic. We have 1 Romanian immigrant and 1 person of mixed race. We have 5 wheelchair users, 4 with other physical disabilities, 1 with a brain injury, 1 with learning disabilities, 4 with mental health issues, 1 who is neurodivergent, and 1 disabled vet who was homeless, and 1 who is still active in military. She's in the National Guard. So that's just in our center. We speak English, Spanish, Romanian, and ASL. So that's just kind of a snapshot of who we are. You want to go to the first slide or the next slide, I guess? One back, okay. So we're going to go with hiring staff. Next, please.
Okay, this is Lakeisha. I will read the slides. Benefits of hiring people within minority communities.
I'm supposed to say within minority communities.
It's like, okay, what is that word? Shows minority populations. Your organization considers them worthy.
And, you know, when looking at trying to serve the minority communities, one of the best things that you can do to welcome them into your center is have a person within that community that works in your center. That does show the minority group that, hey, you know you're out there. We want to include you in our organization.
Respects the culture and value.
And first, I would really like to thank our fellow speakers for their information and their passion. And respecting the culture is so important. And like Maria said, you need to embrace the full culture when you are hiring staff in your centers or serving people from minority groups. And it is important to make sure that they have that ability to communicate and that they feel comfortable speaking their first language, and to include things that are important to them, like Hispanic History Month and Black History Month and all those other things. It doesn't take any money to do these kinds of things. It doesn't take a whole lot to embrace the culture and the values of minorities.
Removes language barriers.
And that can be either with hiring staff or, as Maria said, paying for interpreters.
Improves access to community.
And of course, when your staff is more diverse, again, it is going to open up access to those diverse populations.
Next slide, please. Barriers to employment for people of color, seen as less qualified.
Lakeisha, you can just go ahead and read all of these if you want.
Okay, racism, have to be more qualified, assumed to be less dependable.
So I think that we have heard that from all of our speakers before us about these barriers for people of minorities. And, you know, it is something that is faced on a daily basis. And it is something that I think that we as centers need to address when we are helping people look for employment, and maybe how to answer questions in interviews. We need to make sure that nothing in our applications makes any assumptions about people or disqualifies anybody.
Next slide, please. Attracting diverse applicants. Use consumer-based job descriptions. Focus on lived experience versus education.
So I have always tried to open up our job openings to our consumer base first. I think that is another way of helping people to reach optimum independence. And who better to come into your center and help people the way that they have been helped? Who better to know the services you provide and the benefits that they offer. And in Centers for Independent Living, especially, I think that for me anyway, that lived experience is so very important to what we do. It adds to the peer support, peer mentoring part of our organizations. And what better way to foster serving diverse communities than to look at your consumers and when looking at applicants for jobs, for job openings in your center.
Next slide. Sustaining staff.
So I thought last night that I wish I had taken a picture of our staff instead of looking for a stock photo of a happy staff, because it wasn't easy to find one that had people with disabilities in it. And I thought that was really an important thing to mention, because in the stock photos, there were two that had people with disabilities in it. One had a person in like an old time metal wheelchair, and then the other people were all white. And then there was this one that had a little bit of diversity, and a person in a more modern wheelchair. You know, Kim was talking about, as Centers for Independent Living, we need to look at our communities. We need to, you know, look around. Here in Arkansas, Walmart's huge, you know, so go to Walmart, look around, see the different minorities that you're seeing. And you know, your center staff needs to represent your community.
Next slide. Educating staff on different cultures. Staff sharing culture, integrating different culture into workplace, and service training.
So one thing that we do at our center is we will, once a month, a staff person is in charge of our staff meeting for that week. And we want people to share their culture, whether that is about their disability or their race. And again, like celebrating different holidays, not just the standard ones. You know, I know that we switched out Columbus Day for Juneteenth, and we can do other celebrations. As Maria was saying, you know, there's no reason not to have an event around Cinco de Mayo or other holidays that are important to others.
Next slide. Moving on up, leadership. Adverse internally, advertise internally, leadership is more than management.
So again, at our center, we advertise internally first, and always would like to see members of our staff advance. Another thing, when I say leadership, leadership is more than management. I'm not talking about managers versus leaders. What I'm talking about is leadership can happen at every level, not just the director or the co-director or that type of leadership. You know, being a small center with limited staff, there are opportunities at all levels for your staff members to take that leadership role and begin to foster those leadership skills in your staff.
Next slide. I think that's all.
Lakeisha, do you have anything to add to any of that?
Yes, just a few things that I would like to add is one thing that's important is defining the difference between power and privilege in a workplace. And most individuals that do have privilege, most of them don't know that they have privilege. And in fact, it can be invisible to them. And so having different trainings, getting out in your community, knowing what's in your community, let your community see your face. You know, if you go out, if you're at the store, they'll know, hey, that's sales, and this is what they do. So it's very important to learn that. Also, we talked about language earlier in the slide, but one thing you can do is changing the language in your job description and just with different words. Some words may be strong and maybe just geared more towards men and some more towards women. For example, strong, lead driven or support, patient, group versus manpower, typical versus normal. So those are some things that you can put in. And also when you do, don't try to start so large. You know, when we do go to trainings and we, you know, you have all these great ideas and, you know, when I get back to my center, these are the changes that we're going to make. And sometimes it's better if you start small and really involve all the staff and find out what's important to them and what they want to know more about. Because you can learn a lot from the people at your center. You know, if you just have meetings and talk about different topics and maybe send those out beforehand so they can kind of think about it. You know, sometimes if you bring up a topic about privilege and barriers in a workplace, it's uncomfortable. You know, some people don't want to talk about it. But it needs to be talked about. One other thing I want to end with, I put this in my bio. It is a quote from Stevie Wonder, and it's about just because a man lacks vision, lacks the use of his eyes, doesn't mean he lacks vision. And sometimes we can judge and assume, and sometimes most of the times when you assume, you miss out. You may have a person that walks in your door for a job and you may look at their mannerisms, the way they dress, their vocabulary, and it may be the perfect person for your center and for that community. But you just assume just by looking at them or the way they made you feel, and you miss out on that. So really take the things back that everyone has talked about and take those things in consideration and take them back to your center. Thank you.
Thank you all. So what we're going to do now, now I'm going to ask if everybody will just kind of jump on camera. We're going to move to like the next part of this where we're just going to have a panel discussion with everybody that has shared today. First off, I want to thank each and every one of you for sharing your thoughts, your experiences, your knowledge, your expertise. with everybody that's been on and those that will watch the recording as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw out a question to everybody. And if you want to talk about how this affects your community, or maybe from Brenda and Lakeisha, how you've experienced this in your SIL and that experience as well. So my first question is, what are the benefits or advantages of hiring people within minority communities? So I'm going to throw that out to anybody that.
I am muted myself, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I think that this has already been sort of touched on a little bit when Brenda was speaking, but there are many advantages to hiring diversity, and that is that one of them is that it allows us to see life through a different lens and bring a different perspective into the movement, and also helps us embrace differences a little bit easier. So when we invite people to join us at the table, you know, it's important to actually have a space made for them, made for us. So if you invite me over for dinner, make sure that I have a place to sit at the table. That's what I wanted to say. So the advantages of hiring minorities and diversities come with a great benefit of learning different cultures, bringing just something different to the organization, to the movement, to the space. And it makes just the world a bigger place just by the nature of it. So, yeah.
And I would like to just touch real quickly. You know, Maria had said in her presentation that it brings spice. It brings color, it brings spice, and in all different ways, you know, from food on down, you know, it really does. And it makes your center so much more welcoming to the people that walk in the door.
It's collective growth at its best.
Anybody have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, the part that I would add is, you know, when you think about diversity, it's good for the organization, but it also, in addition to that, it makes each of us smarter as well, because it really challenges us to think differently. Just to use a simple example of, let's say you host dinner on a monthly basis for a group of friends, and you know exactly what everyone eats, and you go out there and, you know, every month you've got the same shopping list, and you go there, you shop for dinner, you come home, you prepare the meal. Then one day a friend calls you up and says, you know what, can I bring a friend along with me? And this friend is vegan, as an example. Now, when you go out shopping, you've got to think differently. You've got to think about, oh, a different recipe, different dishes. And just the thought of having someone with a different dietary need challenges us in a different way. So it really is a lot for that individual growth as well as good for the organization.
Awesome. Thank you. So we actually had a question. I'm going to jump to one of the questions. And so it came in when you were speaking, but I think it will actually apply to a couple of you. And what is the best way to approach the topic of independent living without offending family or culture of the individual?
Maybe I'll jump in with that first, Sierra, if that's okay. You know, I think one of the ways to look at it is, I would recommend is talk about the center, who we are and what we do, as versus you need our help and this is what we can do for you. Because that's when families can tend to become a little defensive. How do you know who I am? What do you know about my culture? How do you, all of those kind of questions. So to kind of prevent that defensiveness that might come in, I would definitely recommend is put the center first, and what do we as a center can do, or what we do, as versus what we can do for you. I would recommend inviting families to come into the center, walk around, just see what you have to offer, meet other folks. So try to make it as comfortable as possible. I think Ken talked about that a lot during his presentation in terms of when they walk in and they see that sense of welcoming, they see that sense of value that people, the way in which people are treated and so on. That might break down some of those barriers that they have, and then they may start opening up to having those conversations.
This is Ken, and I'm used to saying that.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of take a part of what she just said, and it kept going on through the conversation. I keep thinking that is the independent living philosophy, and just use that instead of just being a philosophy, kind of use it as a way of life. And one of the things that I'm suggesting, and may you want to consider, is that when we are talking to people, perhaps not thinking of people as them and they, and start thinking perhaps that's we and us. It's inclusive, and we use that in the independent living philosophy. We are saying that there's not a group of wheelchair users, it's not a group of blind people, it's not a group of people with cognitive disabilities, but it's a disability community. And the same thing might be inclusive as when we were talking about different cultures, different religions, different races. And when we're talking to people, instead of saying, this is da-da-da, 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 and how are you guys doing that? Perhaps accepting as we as a community, as a Arkansasians, I don't know what the actual word is, that this is how we are approaching a certain thing. And you, being whatever segment of the community you're in, is inclusive in that. It's just a suggestion.
And Maria, did you have something you were going to add to that?
Yes, I just wanted to kind of like piggyback on what's already been said by only adding that perhaps one of the things that could be done, and just from personal experience, what made things easier for me when I came in as a young consumer with a mom who was afraid of the independence and what that independence would do to me. I think that it's important. Representation really does matter. So if you have a Latino or a Spanish-speaking person who comes in, even if the consumer themselves do speak English, but they come in with a parent, which, it is tradition. A lot of times, families don't just let it go. So it would be being honest about it and recognizing, hey, we recognize that this is new to you, and try to be, make sure that the person speaking to the consumer of that particular background talks to, is of the similar background, who's able to really understand even without words, just the fact that you have someone who represents that population, a lot of times is enough to open the path of communication and trust. Because when I came in, I saw disabled people, but I didn't see Latinos there. I didn't see people, brown people. I didn't see, so it was a little bit more threatening, I guess. So yeah, I just wanted to say that.
Thank you all. I would love to say that we could continue this conversation for another 3 hours. I will say that when we all met to kind of do a review, I didn't want that conversation to end either. I have continued learning through this process. And I just thank you each for sharing your perspectives, your experience. I think April's continuing this growth as well as all the centers that are on today and the silks that are on today. I think it's not a one and done. Unfortunately, we could have had 15 presentations from each person today to just scratch the surface. Our biggest hope today was that we did identify there was, several communities that were not as well represented within IL. And that this was our hope, is so that when you walk away today, that you understand more about those communities, some of the barriers, and that yes, you're welcoming them to the door as consumers, but you're also considering them as employees, potential employees, or people that you're hoping to recruit as employees, because you see their value in your organization. And so I just thank you all for coming and joining us. And then thank you so much to our sign language interpreters. Thank you to our captioner today. And thank you all for the speakers. It's been a really fun summer for me to try to reach out and then get time to spend with each of y'all and learn more about you and learn more about your communities. I really thank you for each of those times. I'm dropping in a survey into the chat. This just continues to help us to know how we can continue to improve. What else do you want to learn about? This is going to be the first of many conversations when we start talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so this is something that we are putting as a priority within April. And in order to know what you want to learn more about, this is how you do that. So thank you all for coming. The recording and all the slides that were shared will be on our website under the training section, and that will be diversity, equity, inclusion subtab. So there's a whole place where we have lots of resources. And if you have questions, please reach out. I can connect you to maybe some of the speakers if they are open to that, or we can continue the conversation and welcome you to our committee as well. So thank you all again. I hope everybody has a great afternoon, and thank you so much for this time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.